Hi, welcome to U.S. Notes 1.9 at Ms. Richardson's U.S. History 5-minute lectures. This is Political Machines and Bosses in the Progressive Era. It includes information aligned with the first section of your study guide. Remember that you control the lecture. Pause the video whenever you need, write down your questions you have, and rewatch it as often as you need. And always use your study guide to help you take notes. Let's go ahead and get started. I know I've actually mentioned political machines and bosses already in class and in the notes. Now I want you to get to know more about these groups and people and how they impacted the Gilded Age and Progressive Era. This all started with urbanization. As cities grew, so did the needs of the people in the cities. People wanted to know that their government would help them as individuals, and this gave an opening for political machines to thrive. It was not just the poor and disenfranchised that supported political machines. Political parties dominated political life at the time. They controlled the ballot, they organized the campaigns, and really held the loyalty of the party members. There were parades and pageantry associated with political parties, and it was social as well as political. There was always higher voter turnout, and people voted along party lines, rarely splitting their vote between parties. Party loyalty was a way of life. This meant the party with the most members would win the elections. An election win translated directly into control of the resources, including the money. This meant that individuals who desired control of the resources in a city also desired control of the politics in the city. It drew people who desired power and money to organize and run political parties. The political group that ran a city, county, or state through corruption, bribery, threats, and other unfair actions was called a political machine. The most famous of these political machines was Tammany Hall in New York. Tammany Hall and other political machines were run by people called political bosses or party bosses. These were the men, they were always men in the Gilded Age and Progressive Era, who ran the political machine and made sure they gained and retained power from election to election. Boss Tweed, the boss of Tammany Hall, was the most famous of these political bosses. Political machines controlled the activities of the political party in the city. They worked to ensure that their candidates were elected and that the government worked to their advantage. So how exactly did this work? The boss controlled business licenses, jobs, and influenced the court system. Lower leaders, often first or second generation immigrants, helped new immigrants with finding jobs, housing, and naturalization, which is becoming a citizen, in exchange for votes. Political machines were often geared towards specific immigrant groups. The machines would help immigrants get jobs in exchange for votes and support. They would also help them find affordable housing, and then they would get that political support. Political bosses would tell the immigrants and other political machine members exactly what to mark on the ballot, sometimes even accompanying them into the voting booths. They would also drive immigrants and others from polling place to polling place so they could vote multiple times, usually with different identities. There were times during the height of political machines that the number of votes cast were actually higher than the number of eligible voters in a city. You can see this was definitely unfair and corrupt. People were marionettes for these political machines. There were many unfair practices going on, not just this election fraud. Graft, or bribery, was common. Kickbacks were also common. This meant that a company, usually in construction, would bid on the project or on the job, get hired, then pass some of the money given to them for the job back to the boss who hired them, that political or party boss. Essentially, whoever promised to pay the boss the most back from the tax money spent got the job. So there was no close scrutiny on the political machines. The police were hired and run by the bosses, meaning they would look the other way. Judges were often bribed. No one was trying to stop these actions. This meant the corruption of political machines climbed from the city level to the states and eventually all the way to the national government and the presidency, which you'll hear about more later in this unit. So now I'm going to have you read the quote here. This is a quote from a leader of a political machine after a fire. So this should illustrate for you how and why political machines worked the way they did. I did mention Boss Tweed to you and Tammany Hall earlier. This was the most powerful political machine in New York City in the late 1800s. Tweed is believed to have defrauded the city and its taxpayers of millions of dollars. One newspaper even claimed $300 million. He was arrested and convicted in 1871 on 120 counts of fraud and extortion. While this is the most famous case of a corrupt political boss and machine, it's not the only one, and it still didn't stop. The corruption of these machines took power away from the people, which threatened democracy. It took public awareness and new reforms to stop and limit political corruption. We look at this when we look at the national government later in the unit. So this is the end of Notes 1.9. I hope you learned something from the 5-minute lecture, and I'll see you in class with any questions that you have.